Do if you checked your bank account and suddenly found out you were a millionaire. That happened to a former Louisiana sheriff's dispatcher, and instead of notifying the bank, well, she quickly moved the cash into another account and used it to buy a home and an SUV. Kellen Spadoni, who you see here, was arrested for theft and tonight is facing a lawsuit from Charles Schwab after she ignored several of their attempts, they say, to contact her and get the money back. Night court is now in session with civil rights attorney Robert Patillo and criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Let's start here with Exhibit A. On February 23rd, Schwab meant to transfer $82.56 into a Fidelity brokerage account, services account, but the company instead transferred $1,205,619, court records said. So, Robert, is their mistake?
Is their mistake, but that does not mean you have a legal right to that amount of money. Even best case scenario, if you were able to keep it, good luck explaining to the IRS where $1.2 million came from and paying the taxes on that. This is no different than finding someone's wallet and deciding to keep it when they ask for it back. Or if a Brinks truck accidentally dropped money off at your door, it does not mean that you are legally entitled to it. There's legal precedents on it where people back in the old days would cash those Publishers Clearinghouse checks that came to your house and occasionally bank to allow the transaction to go through, but then later on when they figured out the funds were not there, they would reverse it. So though I understand that most people don't have sympathy for big banks in situations like this, you don't have a legal right to it and you're going to end up getting in more trouble than it's worth.
It sounds like she is right now, innocent until proven guilty, but facing a lot of charges. Exhibit B, then, we go to. The company argues in its lawsuit that Spadoni's account contract with Schwab, now this came from the Charles Schwab account, includes an agreement that if a client receives an overpayment of funds, the client is required to return the full amount. Brian.
Well, Shannon, first thing I'm going to do in the morning, I'm running over to Charles Schwab. I'm setting up my account there, and then fingers crossed, I get $1 million. Anyway, all kidding aside, last time I checked, we have a criminal court of law, not a moral court of law. And morally, this woman is incorrect, and she should do the right thing and transfer the money back. But the law is on her side, believe it or not, and I think it's going to trump that agreement that she signed, that she probably didn't even know what she signed, probably didn't even know what she read. But real quick, theft, felony theft is the charge. That means that this woman had to deprive money of someone else without their consent. Charles Schwab sent her the money, so that charge is going to get dropped. The last charge against her is bank wire fraud. Again, she has to show an intent to deprive Charles Schwab of money. Last time I checked, Charles Schwab made a mistake and sent the money to her. So in the real world, she might walk free and she might have $1.2 million and she might have a wrongful termination case against the sheriff's department for firing her.
Loan data. Kenyatta Hooper operated a hobby, toy, and games business and is listed as the only owner. Records show Hooper received a PPP loan from the Small Business Administration for a little more than $38,000 in March of 2021, money that would supposedly pay the salaries of 4 employees. However, an investigation showed that Hooper used those funds designed to provide emergency financial assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic for herself and others. They say Hooper allegedly submitted fake documents and fraudulent applications for PPP loans and directed others to do the same. Allegedly took kickbacks from people she assisted in filing fraudulent PPP loan applications, falsely certified she would use the funds for permissible expenses, and instead spent loan money on a Maserati, personal travel, concerts, and gambling. The fraudulent scheme drew sharp comments from the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, saying in part, bad actors unfortunately have targeted this critical assistance program and fraudulently diverted much-needed resources. Records show Hooper is also listed as the owner of Smart Money Solutions on East Shelby Drive. We tried to reach Kenyatta Hooper at a number given for the business, but got a recording.
I'm sorry, but the person you called has a voicemail box that has not been set up
for COVID business assistance. Court records show Corinne Campbell helped file paperwork for 2 convicted felons. Both received more than $20,000 from the Paycheck Protection Program, claiming their businesses were hurt by the pandemic. The problem, those businesses don't exist, according to prosecutors, and both men were in prison at the time.
Biggest fraud in American history. Billions of dollars in pandemic assistance stolen by scammers. Finding them is the job of the Justice Department. I sat down with Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco to find out how they're doing it.
Even I was surprised at the sheer brazenness of some of these fraud efforts.
Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco is the top cop charged with prosecuting perhaps the biggest fraud in American history, pandemic relief fraud.
There is something that is truly corrupt about somebody or an organization that would go after and try and line their own pockets and take from people who need that aid. I can't think of something that's more corrupt.
Over the past year, the Department of Justice has charged more than 1,000 people and seized back more than $1 billion in cash and luxury items like homes, cars, even a valuable Pokemon card. They say thousands of cases are underway, though that is likely just scratching the surface of the total amount of fraud suspected to have occurred. The goal of holding people accountable is certainly laudable, but at what cost? At the end of the day, you're going to be collecting pennies on the dollar here?
Look, I'll leave the predictions to the investigators and the analysts at the end of the day, but our work is far from over.
Law enforcement sources tell NBC News they believe the majority of those responsible and the stolen funds are overseas. To the extent that you've seen state actors involved here, are our adversaries trying to destabilize us?
Well, I can say this, Lester. We've certainly seen transnational organized criminal groups getting into the business of this pandemic fraud.
In an effort to determine the scale of the loss, President Biden announced last month that the Justice Department would appoint a chief prosecutor for COVID-related fraud.
What we'll be doing in this next phase is focusing on large-scale criminal organizations, transnational actors who took it upon themselves to exploit the relief packages.
Kevin Chambers, a former accountant turned prosecutor, will be deploying strike teams to comb through data, looking for a digital evidence trail. One of the things I know you have seen is people celebrating their success on social media. Look what I got away with. Here's my wad of cash.
It's infuriating.
They're mocking you. They're mocking the government.
They're mocking the government. Yeah. They're boasting about their crimes. But we've got the data. So you may get on Instagram and show off your fancy new watch. You may be buying furniture for the ill-gotten vacation home. But the fact of the matter is, at some point, you can expect a knock on your door holding you to account.
But with estimates of hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars stolen, the task is enormous and only expected to grow. We're talking fraud in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Can you handle those many cases?
We can and we will, Lester.
How do you know when you're successful, given the fact that you or no one else can? fraud in American history. Billions of dollars in pandemic assistance stolen by scammers. Finding them is the job of the Justice Department. I sat down with Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco to find out how they're doing it.
Even I was surprised at the sheer brazenness of some of these fraud efforts.
Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco is the top cop charged with prosecuting perhaps the biggest fraud in American history, pandemic relief fraud.
There is something that is truly corrupt about somebody or an organization that would go after and try and line their own pockets and take from people who need that aid. I can't think of something that's more corrupt.
Over the past year, the Department of Justice has charged more than 1,000 people and seized back more than $1 billion in cash and luxury items, like homes, cars, even a valuable Pokemon card. They say thousands of cases are underway, though that is likely just scratching the surface of the total amount of fraud suspected to have occurred.
The goal of holding people accountable is certainly laudable, but at what cost? At the end of the day, you're going to be collecting pennies on the dollar here?
Look, I'll leave the predictions to the investigators and the analysts at the end of the day, but our work is far from over.
Law enforcement sources tell NBC News they believe the